Dear friends, I welcome you to my channel. I am Taras Berezovets. After an extremely tense weekend, today we will discuss the most important news, and there is quite a lot of it. The key piece of news appeared in several leading Western media outlets. The first to report on this were the New York Times and Reuters almost simultaneously, followed by others, including the Associated Press, Washington Post, Financial Times, and other leading Western outlets. It concerns news regarding the decision made by the outgoing President Joe Biden's administration to allow strikes with American weapons on Russian military targets within the territory of the Russian Federation, and that it was specifically detailed that the first strikes are expected to be carried out using ATACMS missiles with a range of 300 kilometers. It is important to note that, thus, Western publications report that the Kursk region will be the first to be targeted, and in total, as already calculated, nearly 5 million residents of the Russian Federation will be within the strike zone. This concerns all border regions, including Rostov, Bryansk, Kursk. Overall, over 200 military facilities will be under threat in Russian Federation, including 16 airfields. Meanwhile, at the ongoing G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, a key report is expected to be the proposal from Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan regarding the responsibility for ending the war in Ukraine through a ceasefire. In many details, Erdogan's plan echoes the proposal of the elected 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump, with a few nuances. In particular, Erdogan proposes to freeze Ukraine's NATO membership for the next 10 years. In Trump's plan, which was unofficially published by Western media, it was never confirmed by Trump himself. But we can generally trust this information, as it was reported by the Wall Street Journal. It mentions a 20-year freeze. In addition, Erdogan, like Trump's plan, suggests the introduction of peacekeepers to the territory, although their specifics are not clarified. And one more difference is that it suggests the transfer of weapons to Ukraine, including from Turkey. However, a similar situation exists in Trump's plan. The Kremlin has already responded with a refusal to Erdogan's proposal. This was stated by Dmitry Peskov. This plan, he stated, is inherently unacceptable for the Kremlin. Meanwhile, North Korea is preparing to transfer a contingent of 100,000 to the territory of the Russian Federation. However, this will not happen all at once. We are talking about, say, a sufficiently long period of time, but nevertheless, the announced figure completely changes the configuration of North Korean military participation in the war against Ukraine. That is, if we are currently talking about a contingent of 15,000 soldiers, 100,000 is already 7 times more. And this has obviously become one of the reasons why the administration of outgoing President Biden made the corresponding decision. Because of this, a whole diplomatic war has already erupted. Besides Peskov, I have already commented on these strikes. Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, an odious European politician known for his pro-Russian views. Following the Biden administration, France and Britain may decide to grant permission for Ukrainian forces to strike the territory of Russia. However, the news that France granted the corresponding permission disappeared from the official website of the leading French publication, L'Œil. Meanwhile, Iran has become another country that refused to supply Russian weapons, in particular the latest S-300 air defense systems after their destruction by Israel. 3 systems were destroyed as a result of a missile attack by Israel a few weeks ago. And finally, Germany is already preparing to supply Ukraine with strike drones based on artificial intelligence called Helsing. A total of at least 4,000 of them are expected to be supplied. They are also called Mini-Taurus. We will discuss all of this further, friends. So, Bloomberg reports that the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who arrived at the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, plans to present his plan for freezing the Russian-Ukrainian war there today. In Rio de Janeiro, Erdogan plans to discuss with the other attending leaders of the G20. By the way, Putin did not arrive there. He stated that he does not want complications. Well, it is known that Brazil, like South Africa and India, are signatories of the Rome Statute. Therefore, from a formal and legal point of view, Putin's presence there would mean that the Brazilian authorities would have to arrest him and hand him over to the investigators of the International Criminal Court in The Hague. As we know, Putin is afraid and terrified in every way, but moreover, what frightens him primarily is not so much the arrest itself. It is unlikely he would be arrested there. To be frank, the Brazilian authorities probably would not dare to take such a step. But he is terrified by the very fact of humiliation, the very fact of discussing this issue, as well as the fact that his plane is refusing to refuel, which he would inevitably have to do. In Brazil, however, his chief diplomat, the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Sergei Lavrov, has gone there, a talking horse who was already welcomed on the red carpet and escorted to the Museum of Modern Art, where all the G20 summit events are taking place, although logically this horse should have been sent to the stable, agree that something here has gone against logic. Returning to Erdogan's plan, which was announced and has already been rejected in the Kremlin, Erdogan proposes, like Trump's plan published a week ago by the leading American publication Wall Street Journal, to create a demilitarized zone in eastern Donbass and to deploy international troops there, quote, as an additional guarantee. What kind of troops these should be is unknown. This is not publicly disclosed. It is quite possible we will hear about this today from Erdogan's own statements. He also offers, as a carrot to Ukraine, to refrain from joining NATO for the next 10 years, as well as compensation in the form of arms supplies and additionally security guarantees. Again, I will repeat, this all looks quite vague. Nevertheless, representatives of the Turkish delegation, in an interview with Bloomberg while speaking on anonymous terms, stated that they do not expect Ukraine to accept such a proposal in general, although it appears to be the most realistic approach. In addition, Erdogan's position is to postpone discussions regarding the occupied territories for some time and to focus on ensuring a stable ceasefire. And as a whip, as a lever of pressure, Bloomberg quotes representatives of Erdogan's administration stating that Erdogan allegedly received intelligence indicating that Ukraine may lose even more territory in the coming months if hostilities are not stopped. That is, Ukraine will be squeezed, pressured by the fact that, according to their assessments, the situation on the ground will worsen, so it is necessary to agree as quickly as possible. Well, as quickly as possible, there is a 2-month deadline until the moment of the oath-taking by President Donald Trump, since his predecessor Joe Biden decided to escalate the situation, which we will discuss. Next, the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro will take place today and tomorrow, November 18th, 19th. Russia, like Turkey, is a member of the G20, while Ukraine is not. As Bloomberg writes, Ukrainian President Zelensky was unable to attend the summit, despite having made a corresponding request to Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. And he, quoting Bloomberg, ignored all of Zelensky's desperate requests for an invitation. Again, there is no official confirmation of this information. Official Ukraine did not reach out to representatives of the Brazilian authorities regarding participation, but we know that such a format was anticipated and Zelensky participated in similar negotiations. The G7, when Japan was presiding, well, the corresponding decision, the invitation, is accepted by the presiding country in any case. In this case, Brazil is presiding over the G20. We can already state that there are, in fact, no representatives from Ukraine or diplomats. That is, whether there was a request for an invitation, we do not know. But the fact is that Brazil did not invite the Ukrainian delegation. And finally, the reaction from the Kremlin. Peskov stated that Erdogan's proposals for a freeze on the war are inherently unacceptable. Any option for a freeze along the line of combat is inherently unacceptable to the Russian side. Peskov stated that the conditions formulated in June, which were referred to as an ultimatum by President Putin, remain fully relevant. This is what needs to be done in order for hostilities to be stopped. Peskov also stated at the briefing that Erdogan's plan was not discussed with them, i.e., Erdogan did not discuss these conditions with Putin, and apparently they were not discussed through diplomatic channels. Peskov was also asked to comment on this today. Excellent. According to reports from Western media, Biden's decision to allow strikes on Russian territory was not discussed with Scholz. However, there is information that the Biden administration made the corresponding decision on November 14th, but only announced it the day before on Sunday, that is 3 days after. Could Putin have been unaware of this permission? It is unlikely that he did not know. I think this information was discussed in fairly large circles, including expert ones. Therefore, Russian intelligence almost certainly had this information. What they discussed with Scholz is absolutely... It is clear that since Scholz still does not want to provide Taurus to Ukraine, he has no relation to the decision on strikes with American-made ATACMS or British-French storm shadow. Therefore, from a formal point of view, he could have been excluded from this discussion. What Scholz agreed to transfer is outgoing since early elections, will take place in February 2025. And it is quite obvious that Scholz will not be the head of government. Even if the party, which is practically unrealistic, the Social Democrats, manages to remain in the ruling coalition, it is almost certain that it will be a different candidate. But with the current ratings, his chances, let's say, are not very high. Nevertheless, Bild reports that starting in December, several hundred high-tech German strike drones, Helsing, will begin to be received monthly by the armed forces of Ukraine. A total of approximately 4,000 drones are expected to be delivered. These are strike drones based on artificial intelligence, as stated on Monday by an official representative of the German Ministry of Defense, without specifying. According to the publication Bild, the software producer is located in Bavaria, in the capital of Bavaria, Munich, and they specialize in the use of artificial intelligence in the production of weapons. And in September, a corresponding contract was signed with the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. The Helsing drones are not ordinary drones that are guided by a UAV operator, but high-tech aircraft controlled by artificial intelligence. That is, they are also called mini-Taurus. They independently identify targets, determine their flight trajectory, and prioritize, so to speak, the value of the target. For instance, if there is a pickup, an armored personnel carrier, or a tank, the drone will choose the tank as the more expensive target. All silhouettes of military equipment for these drones are already clearly defined. They possess machine vision and thus prioritize targets according to which they will strike. A total of 4,000, and we understand that these are drones that have a unique capability that is currently in high demand. They are called revolutionary drones because they are virtually immune to RAP systems. In particular, they cannot be jammed by GPS jammers. And most electronic warfare systems that are in service with the Russian troops, they operate even in the most unfavorable conditions, i.e., in practically zero visibility. They proceed obviously based on the course programmed into them, i.e., they can remain in the air, hitting targets in conditions of dense fog, snowfall, and heavy rain, as reported. Their effectiveness is assessed to be much higher than that of conventional strike drones. But depending on the type, the effectiveness of strike drones can be assessed at a level, in some cases, of 10%, meaning 1 out of 10 drones hits. The effectiveness of the mini-Taurus drones from these companies, Helsing, is not disclosed. It is unknown, but it is clear that this information is classified. However, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius stated that the new drones could be used against key Russian military targets, including command posts and logistics facilities. It is not reported whether permission will be granted for these strike drones to operate over Russian territory, but 4,000 is not a very large number, especially considering the nature of the war. Thousands of UAVs are used daily, so 4,000, again, is unclear in terms of mass, and the amount of explosives it carries is unknown. However, as an announcement regarding the use of drones with artificial intelligence, all of this looks quite promising. By the way, there is information that North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un has ordered the urgent start of production and development of strike UAVs. It is precisely on this that the North Korean military industry will concentrate its efforts on the production of FPV drones. For now, North Korea is sending FPV soldiers in addition to the 15,000 that have already been sent to the territory of the Russian Federation and are currently undergoing training mainly in the Far East, a small number of them, approximately over 2,000. In the Kursk region, strikes will be carried out specifically against them. They plan to send an additional 85,000 of their disposable FPV North Korean soldiers, in addition to these 15,000. This estimate is provided by Bloomberg, citing data from delegations of some G20 countries. There is a huge flow of insider information coming from the G20, just an avalanche of information that will need to be analyzed over the coming week. As noted by Bloomberg, similar estimates were previously voiced by Ukraine's ambassador to South Korea, Dmytro Ponomarenko, in an interview he gave to Voice of America. He stated then about 15,000 North Korean soldiers who would be sent to the Kursk region. Well, this has already caused, of course, outrage and a specific reaction from the American administration, which nevertheless refuses to confirm all these facts. Despite the leading publications that I listed at the beginning, such as Reuters, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, the Biden administration does not confirm the corresponding authorization. In particular, the Deputy National Security Advisor to the U.S. President, that is, Deputy Jake Sullivan, Jonathan Feiner, did not confirm media reports that Washington had authorized Ukraine to strike military targets in Russia, specifically with attack missiles. This was reported by ABC News. I do not confirm any decisions that were or were not made regarding U.S. assistance when it comes to such operational matters, Feiner stated. He also commented on Peskov's words. Regarding the fact that this is a qualitatively new stage of tension, Peskov stated this. The Deputy Advisor Sullivan stated that regarding the comments that came from Russia, the fire was ignited by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That is, well, essentially, he sent Peskov a message saying, "Look at yourself, you fool." He also accused the Kremlin of escalating the war in Ukraine and deploying North Korean troops. These are essentially the key reasons. That is, the first reason for the deployment of North Korean troops is the crossing of a red line. Earlier, representatives of the Biden administration warned that if North Korean troops ended up in Ukraine, it would be crossing yet another red line, and there would be a response to this. This is that response. The second reason, over the weekend there was mass shelling. More than 100 missiles and more than 100 drones were launched at peaceful cities. The most severe destruction with a high number of casualties. This is Odessa. Sumy. Other cities also experienced strikes and everything was shelled, including the West. Ukraine was shelled, including those areas that are very rarely hit, in particular Zakarpattia. A lot of missiles were launched at the Lviv region, and we see that there are now outages. The electricity shutdown schedule is being applied again across Ukraine, and this is at a time when the temperature is dropping. A gradual decrease is starting now. Soon it will be consistently below zero, winter. And these barbaric bombings, to which Russia has been accumulating missiles, are, by the way, the response to all these attempts to negotiate in the middle by some Western leaders. We see that Scholz spoke with Putin on Friday, and by Sunday, a massive shelling is happening across all of Ukraine. This is, in fact, how Putin is ready to proceed with de-escalation. Well, the Kremlin, of course, traditionally blamed everyone, meaning the entire West is again escalating. In particular, this was stated by Peskov. If such a decision, he stated, was indeed formulated and communicated to the Kiev regime, this represents a qualitatively new type of tension, a qualitatively new situation in terms of the United States' involvement in this conflict, said the mustached grandmother. At the same time, he stated that officially we only have information from Western media. He also believes that this, in essence, set up a trap for Trump for the next 47th president, which now leaves him with a legacy. Joe Biden, strikes will be carried out, confirmed only regarding the Kursk region. This is unanimously reported by all Western media, but there is already information from representatives. Trump himself does not comment on the situation, but there are representatives from his circle. In particular, Trump's son Donald Trump Jr. wrote on the social network X that the military-industrial complex, meaning the U.S. complex, wants World War III to start before my father has a chance to establish peace and save lives. Damn it, idiots, wrote Trump Jr. Elon Musk accused Biden of, I quote, orchestrating a large-scale escalation. His goal is to create the worst possible situation for Trump, wrote Musk. And John F. Kennedy Jr., a candidate for the position of Secretary of Health in the Trump administration, also stated that this decision creates additional risks for Trump's future administration. While all supporters, in any case, we see from the reaction key speakers from Trump's team who have spoken out, the rest are silent, particularly, let's say, national security advisors, the same Waltz, we see, said nothing in the end, and those who do speak out do so very negatively, which hints to us that Trump himself, although silent, indicates that he does not support Biden's decision. And whether he will cancel it or not is unknown. The final decision will be up to the 47th President of the United States. But I will repeat, at the very least, the position of his closest circle is critical. After that, everyone can draw their own conclusion. Will Trump cancel Biden's administration's decision or not? Meanwhile, Russia's ally Iran has completely abandoned purchases of Russian air defense systems after an Israeli Air Force strike on the night of October 26th involving 100 aircraft, including F-35 stealth fighters. At that time, Israel disabled 12 installations where fuel for Iranian ballistic missiles was produced. 3 S-300 complexes were completely destroyed and another one was hit. And now Iran does not intend to purchase S-400 Triumph complexes. Meanwhile, in Russia, they are calculating how many territories will fall within the strike zone. As reported by the Moscow Times, based on Rosstat statistics, nearly 5 million Russians in major cities in the south and west will be in the strike zone. In particular, ATACMS missiles with a range of 306 kilometers will be able to hit Rostov-on-Don with a population of 1,140,000, Voronezh with 146,000, and Kursk with a population of 436,000. Also, Oriol and Bryansk populations 296,000 and 373,000, and Taganrog with 245,000. It turns out that Lipetsk with nearly 500,000, 486,000, Smolensk with 312,000, and Kaluga with 329,000 are also in the strike zone. Thus, the Kremlin is already calculating where and what could strike in this 300-kilometer strike zone, which contains at least 245 military facilities. This was stated by the Institute for the Study of War, including 16 airfields of the Russian military aviation. The basing of Russian units, their deployment points, headquarters, command centers, arms manufacturing plants, and fuel storage facilities mean that the Kremlin, with Peskov and Putin, is already deeply saddened, especially knowing that they can hardly intercept ATACMS missiles. Well, there is definitely no statistics there, as it is kept secret by the Russian occupiers, but according to some reports, it was stated that they can intercept no more than 1 out of 5 missiles, no more. This means that the effectiveness of Russian air defense in this case is approximately 20%, with 80% hitting the target, as the attack with this missile is highly accurate and they hit their targets precisely. These are our news, friends, for today. We will be watching the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro very closely, which is both alarming and optimistic, where copies of President Erdogan's peace plan will be debated, which, I reiterate, repeats many details of the peace plan previously published in the Western press by President Trump. And we are following the developments regarding the use of American precision weapons. It is expected to happen literally any day now. That is, it could happen even today. This is reported by Western media. Take care of yourselves, friends. Subscribe to the channel. I remind you, we already have over 1 million on this channel, and a special thank you to you. In the near future, we will prepare and post a video. A thank you to all viewers, our regular subscribers, and channel sponsors, where I will briefly talk about our upcoming plans. These are the news. Friends, take care of yourselves. Glory to Ukraine, Ukrainian Armed Forces, Special Forces, Territorial Defense, Major Taras Berezovets, Ukrainian Army, bye-bye.